My name's Maya Collins, and if someone had told me a year ago that a single message could change the entire shape of my life, I'd have laughed and gone back to scrolling through my phone. But that's exactly how it happened. Quietly, accidentally, and a little too late to stop it. I live in Portland, Oregon, in a small apartment above a coffee shop that never closes. My mornings start with the smell of roasted beans and rain. I'm 27, a freelance photographer, and perpetually in between jobs. And apparently in between people too. When I met Eli, it wasn't romantic at all. It was awkward. He came into the cafe downstairs one Thursday morning. Rain sticking to his denim jacket, hair a mess, phone pressed to his ear. He looked tired, like the kind of person who'd been up all night trying to fix something he didn't break. I noticed him because he was standing exactly where the sunlight cut through the window, and the steam from his coffee rose like smoke between us. That he didn't notice me. Not then. But the next morning he came again. And the next. And the next. After a week he finally said something. "You always sit here with your camera," he said, nodding toward the Canon on my table. "You actually take pictures, or is that just for show?" I smirked. "Depends. You always wear that jacket, or is that for show?" He laughed, a real one, not the polite kind people give when they don't know you yet. His eyes were this strange color, somewhere between green and gray, like a cloudy day that might still turn bright. That was how it started. We talked for weeks, first in passing, then over shared coffee, then sitting outside under the leaking awning when it rained too hard to go anywhere else. He told me he worked as a contractor, renovating old houses, which I secretly thought was kind of poetic. Fixing things other people had given up on. He had scars on his hands, thin white lines that caught the light when he gestured. One day I asked about them. He shrugged. "Work accident. Long story." And he changed the subject. But there was something about him, this constant, quiet tension. Like he was holding a secret too big for his chest. That I started taking photos of him without meaning to. His hands wrapped around a coffee cup. His reflection in the cafe window. The way his mouth tilted slightly before he smiled. It felt wrong but also inevitable. Then one day he didn't show up. Not that day. Not the next. Not for an entire week. That I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. That I'd imagined the connection, or made it bigger than it was. But then, on a gray Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Eli, I owe you a coffee. You free tonight?" We met at a bar near the river. One of those places where the lights are too dim and the music's just soft enough to make secrets easier to tell. He looked different that night. Tired, again, but sharper. Like something had happened. "I had to go out of town," he said before I even asked. "Family stuff." I nodded. I didn't press. We talked about everything and nothing. Music, work, the weird graffiti downtown that someone kept painting over and over. At some point, he reached across the table and brushed a strand of hair from my face. Just a small, quiet movement, but it felt like gravity shifted around us. When he kissed me later that night, outside under the orange streetlight, it felt like the city held its breath. We started seeing each other often after that. Dinners, walks, nights that bled into mornings. That he never talked about his family again. I never asked. But sometimes in the middle of a conversation he'd go silent, eyes far away, jaw tight. Like a memory was clawing at him. Once, I found a small envelope in the pocket of his jacket while we were doing laundry at my place. It had no name, no address, just a folded photograph inside. A woman and a little boy, standing in front of a red house. When I asked him about it, he froze. "That's my sister," he said slowly. "And her kid. They're in Seattle." Then he took the photo back, stuffed it into his jacket, and changed the subject. But later, lying next to him, I realized something. He never said her name. Weeks passed. Portland grew colder. One morning, I woke up and he was already gone. No text, no call. Just a note on the kitchen counter. "Had to go fix something. Don't wait up." I waited anyway. Days turned into a week. Then two. When I finally gave up, it wasn't dramatic. No tears, no shouting. Just quiet. The kind that seeps into everything. Until one night around midnight, someone knocked on my door. It wasn't Eli. It was a woman. Dark hair, eyes sharp but tired. She looked like she'd been driving for hours. Are you Maya? She asked. I nodded, clutching my sweater tighter. She handed me a small brown envelope. I'm his sister, she said softly. He told me to give you this if anything ever happened. My stomach dropped. If anything ever happened? What do you mean? But she didn't answer. She just squeezed my hand, whispered I'm sorry, and left before I could ask another word. Inside the envelope was a single Polaroid photo. It was me, sitting in the cafe, sunlight through the window, camera in hand. On the back, written in his messy handwriting. For once, I wanted to be the one captured, before everything disappears. I didn't sleep that night. The photo lay on my kitchen table, its white edges curled slightly, as if it had lived in someone's pocket too long. My own face stared back at me, soft, unaware, frozen in that moment of sunlight and routine that I tried to remember when he could have taken it. Maybe one of those mornings I'd looked up and found him watching me through the cafe window. Maybe he'd always meant for this to be a goodbye. The next morning, I called every number I had for him, straight to voicemail. His phone was either off or gone. The bar where we first met hadn't seen him in weeks. His landlord said his rent was paid up for the next 2 months, in cash, but the apartment was empty. Completely. No clothes. No toothbrush. Not even dust on the shelves. It was like he'd been erased. I tried to keep going. I really did. My camera stayed on the table untouched. I took photos of strangers, of empty streets, of rain hitting the pavement, but everything came out gray, flat, meaningless. There are people who can disappear quietly. Eli was one of them, but the absence he left behind was loud. It screamed inside every silence. A few weeks later, I ran into Ben, one of Eli's co-workers. I knew him vaguely, tall guy, kind smile, always covered in sawdust. I caught him at a hardware store. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. You haven't seen Eli lately, have you? Ben Froned. Elitene. I nodded. He rubbed his neck. He left the company. Month ago, maybe more. Boss said he had some legal stuff to sort out. My stomach tightened. Legal stuff? Yeah, he said, lowering his voice. Not sure what exactly, but it didn't sound good. Cops came by asking questions a while back. Thought maybe he'd skip town. I felt my throat close. Skip town. Legal trouble. None of it made sense. That night, I pulled the photo of the woman and the boy, the one I'd found in his jacket, from my drawer. I'd made a copy before he took the original back. For the first time, I looked closer. Behind them, the red house had a small mailbox. And on the side of it, just visible under the sunlight, were the numbers 1642. I opened Google Maps and typed 1642 Red House, Seattle. It wasn't much to go on, but somehow, miraculously, I found it. The street view showed the same house, a little older now, the paint fading. And the weird thing? It wasn't in any residential area. It was listed as an address for a recovery center. My hands trembled. Recovery from what? 2 days later, I was driving north on I-5, rain slamming against my windshield. I told myself it was just curiosity, closure. That I'd go there, ask about Eli, maybe find out he was fine. That he'd just left like he always did. But deep down I knew. People don't leave notes like "don't wait up" unless they're already gone. The center was small, a converted house at the edge of town. The paint really was red, though peeling at the corners. I parked across the street, heart hammering, and went inside. The woman at the front desk looked up from her computer. Hi, can I help you? Yeah, I'm looking for someone, I said, trying to sound steady. Elitene. I think he might have been connected to this place. She blinked. You're? A friend, I said quickly. She hesitated, then sighed. I'm not supposed to give out personal information, but she glanced around, lowered her voice. Eli wasn't a patient. He volunteered here. Off and on for a couple of years. Volunteered. Yeah. Especially after his sister. She stopped herself like she'd said too much. After his sister what? I pressed. The woman sighed. Look, I shouldn't be saying this. But his sister overdosed. 2 years ago. She didn't make it. The boy in that photo, that was her son. Elias Netev. The kid's in foster care now. I felt the air leave my lungs. Overdose. Foster care. The sister who came to my door wasn't his sister at all. I drove home in silence, every mile heavier than the last. Who was she then? Why would she lie? And why did Eli trust her enough to give her that envelope for me? When I reached my apartment, I found another envelope taped to my door to no return address. My name written in the same messy handwriting I'd come to know too well. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Maya, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't fix it that I told you once I worked with my hands because I liked rebuilding what was broken. But the truth is, some things can't be rebuilt. Some things stay cracked, no matter how much you want them whole again. That I didn't lie to you. I just didn't tell you everything. The woman in that photo wasn't my sister. She was someone I loved once. She was also an addict. I tried to save her, and I failed. Her son isn't mine, but he might as well have been. That I got mixed up in things I shouldn't have. I took money that wasn't mine to help her, to help the boy. And now they're both gone and I'm paying the price. You were the first good thing I'd touched in years. Don't go looking for me. Please. Amy's hands were shaking so badly, I nearly tore the page. He'd lied. And not lied. Loved someone else, and yet somehow, I didn't hate him for it. I just felt hollow. Weeks passed. Portland turned from gray to silver with winter. The cafe downstairs hung string lights in the window. People moved on. I tried to. Then one morning, I got a letter. Not an envelope, a postcard. No return address. Just a picture of the Oregon coast, the sky pale and endless. On the back. You said once you wanted to take photos of places that don't look real. You should go to the coast this weekend. Sometimes, it helps to see where the horizon ends. No name. No signature. But I knew that handwriting anywhere. I drove there the next day, because of course I did. The road twisted through the cliffs, fog rising from the sea like ghosts. The closer I got, the stronger the wind blew, until it felt like it was trying to push me back. When I reached the overlook, I parked and got out. The air smelled of salt and rain. The ocean roared below, endless and dark. And on the wooden railing, half hidden under a pile of wet leaves, was another Polaroid. It was of me again. Taken from behind this time, standing at the edge of the cafe window weeks ago. On the back, written in the same slanted hand. Still moving. Still here. That's when I realized he'd been following me, or maybe watching over me. And for the first time in months, I lifted my camera and took a photo. Of the sea. Of the empty railing. Of the space where something, or someone, might still exist, just out of sight. That night I didn't cry. I just sat on the hood of my car, staring at the waves, the wind tangling my hair, and I whispered into the air. Wherever you are, Eli, I hope you fixed it. The sea didn't answer, but it didn't need to. Sometimes love doesn't end. It just changes form. It's strange how quickly you learn to live with someone's absence. At first, it's unbearable, like a missing tooth your tongue can't stop searching for. Then it becomes part of your day. A small silence you carry like a bruise under your ribs. It had been 8 months since Eli's last message. That I still had the postcard from the Oregon coast pinned to my fridge. That I told myself I wasn't waiting. That I was fine. That I'd moved on. But I hadn't. Some nights, I'd wake up and think I heard a knock on the door. Other times, I'd catch a flash of someone familiar in a crowd. A jacket, a way of walking, and my heart would trip over itself. Eli had become a ghost that still knew my name. By spring, I'd started working again, shooting portraits for a local magazine. One of my assignments was to photograph a small art exhibition downtown. The gallery was bright and white, full of people who pretended not to be lonely. I was walking through the last room when I saw it. A photograph, framed in black, hung slightly off center. It was me. Sitting in the cafe, camera in hand, sunlight cutting across my face. The exact same photo he'd left me in that first envelope. Only this time, beneath it, there was a small plaque. Still moving. By E.T. My heart slammed in my chest. Eli Turner. He was alive. I found the curator near the door. Who submitted this? I asked, trying to sound calm. She smiled. Oh, that piece? It came anonymously. Just a package with the photo, the frame, and a note saying to display it here for a month. When was that? About 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks he'd been here. I walked home that night through the drizzle, my thoughts louder than the traffic. Why would he send that photo? Why now? Was it a message or a goodbye? When I reached my building, I noticed something strange. A small envelope wedged under my door. No name. Just a single initial on the front. Inside was a map. A hand-drawn map. It showed the coast. The same one from his postcard, but marked with a red X deep in the cliffs. Beneath it, one line. If you still want answers, come before the tide comes in. The next morning I drove out again. The sky was low and silver, the kind of weather that feels like the world's holding its breath. I followed the map down a narrow trail, rocks slick under my boots, until I reached a small cove hidden between the cliffs. And there he was, Eli. He looked older, thinner, tired, but unmistakably him. The same gray-green eyes, the same quiet way of standing, like he was always halfway between staying and running. For a moment, I couldn't move. He smiled, barely. Hey, photographer. That single word broke me. I walked toward him slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast he'd vanish. You're alive, I said, my voice breaking. He nodded. Mostly. I wanted to hit him, to scream, to cry, to hold him, all at once. Instead, I just said, why? He looked out toward the ocean. I didn't lie about everything, Maya. Just enough to keep you safe. Safe from what? He hesitated, then sighed. The money I told you about, it wasn't just for her. It was for someone else, too. People who didn't like being owed. When she died, they came for me. I thought if I disappeared, it'd stop there. And did it? Eventually. He turned to me then, his expression softer. I watched you sometimes. From a distance. The way you kept going. I wanted to come back, but I didn't know if I deserved to. My throat tightened. You don't get to decide that. He smiled faintly. Maybe not. But I thought I'd give you a choice. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. I kept this, he said. Every day I wanted to call you, I wrote instead. He placed it in my hands. The cover was warm from his touch. I don't want forgiveness, he said quietly. Just for you to know that you weren't something I ran from. You were the only thing that made me want to stop running. I couldn't speak. All the anger I'd held onto for months dissolved into something sadder, heavier, but somehow gentler. I looked at him. The man who'd ruined me and saved me in the same breath, and said, you could have told me. I know, he whispered. But if I had, would you have let me go? No, he smiled again. Exactly. We sat on the rocks for hours, saying nothing, just listening to the ocean breathe. The tide was rising, inch by inch, waves lapping at our shoes. Finally he stood. I have to leave soon, he said. For real this time. I stared at him. Where? He hesitated. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere I can start over. Will you come back? He looked out toward the horizon, a line between gray sky and darker water, and said, if I can. He reached out and brushed his fingers against mine. Take photos, he said. Of everything. Even the things that hurt. Especially those. Then he walked toward the cliffs, his figure shrinking against the fog, until the sea swallowed him from sight. I waited until sunset before I left. The tide had almost covered the spot where he'd been standing. Back in my car, I opened the notebook. Each page was filled with small, careful handwriting, fragments of days, memories, apologies, and sketches of places I'd never seen. And on the very last page, if you ever wonder where I went, look for the light. I'll be somewhere near it. Months passed again. The magazine I worked for sent me on assignment to photograph small towns along the coast. New beginnings, they called it. I stopped in one place, a forgotten fishing town north of Astoria. And in a tiny local gallery, I saw it. A new photograph, black and white, of the ocean, taken from the cliffs. The title, The Edge of Stillness by E.T. No one there knew who had sent it. I smiled. That night, I stood by the window of my motel, the wind moving through the curtains, the sea humming in the distance. I took out my camera, the same one he'd first teased me about, and aimed it toward the fading horizon. The shutter clicked once, sharp and certain, and for the first time, the photo didn't feel empty. It felt like motion, like breath, like the air still moved, even when he was gone. Epilogue. It's been a year now. The world hasn't slowed down for me, but I've stopped trying to chase it. Sometimes I still check the mail, half expecting another envelope. And sometimes, when the light hits just right through the cafe window, I swear I see him again. Sitting across the street, jacket damp from rain, smiling that tired, quiet smile. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's hope. Maybe it's both. Either way, I take the picture. Because some people leave, but the way they looked at you, that stays forever.